The bass rattled through the warehouse walls like the heartbeat of a living, furious beast. The air was a cocktail of sweat, smoke, glitter, and desperation, thick enough to choke on if you weren't already drowning in the music. Outside, Brooklyn streets buzzed with the usual Friday chaos, horns, catcalls, the hum of late-night bodies, but in here, the world was narrowed to strobes, sequins, and the promise of escape. Backstage, chaos reigned. Lace-front wigs perched precariously on mannequin heads, eyeshadow palettes cracked and bleeding pigment across tables, feather boas tangled like veins spilling from a wounded body. The queens snapped at each other with the precision of knives. "Bitch, if you touch my lashes again, I swear I'll staple gun them to your face," shrieked Miss Vicious, a towering queen in 6-inch heels that could double as weapons. "You wish you had a face worth stealing from," purred Crystal Vice, adjusting her rhinestone corset so tight her ribs whined with every breath. They weren't just performers, they were combatants, locked in a nightly war of shade and survival. Every drag show was its own apocalypse, where only the boldest egos survived. In the crowd beyond the stage curtain, hundreds of bodies writhed. Club kids with painted neon faces, leather harnesses glistening under the strobes, mascara melting in the heat. Frenemies clinked glasses of cheap vodka, muttering curses in the same breath they muttered compliments. The warehouse had become a cathedral of excess, of pounding sound and synthetic ecstasy. And none of them noticed what had begun outside. At first, it was only whispers. A man stumbling in from the street, gray-skinned, eyes clouded over like shattered glass. His hands twitching, as if scrolling through a phone only he could see. No one thought much of it, Brooklyn was full of broken people. But then came another. And another. Each face slack, drool trailing, hands frozen in that same scrolling gesture, clawing through the air as if searching for something just out of reach. They called them, the scrollers, later. Brain-thirsty, hollow, twitching like addicts without a fix. But at that moment, they were simply bodies that didn't belong at a party. Inside, drag mother Gilda Grace tried to keep her brood in line. "Children, if you can't keep it together backstage, how the hell are you supposed to slay out there? Do you want them to remember you for your talent or your tantrums?" Her voice cracked with exhaustion. She was the kind of queen who'd been through decades of late-night battles, AIDS, eviction, heartbreak, the whole apocalypse of queer survival. Glitter in her crow's feet, powder in the creases of her hands. She knew drama, but she didn't know this. Not yet. The first scream cut through the music like a blade. It came from the bar, high-pitched and ragged, followed by the crash of glass. At first, everyone assumed it was just another fight, too much coke, too much vodka, too much jealousy, but then the crowd began to part, not willingly, but as if shoved aside by something hungry. A man stumbled forward, his mouth crimson with blood not his own. He clutched at a club kid's sequined shoulder, dragging his teeth across soft flesh. The kid's neon-painted jaw split open, spraying color and gore across the floor. The bass line didn't stop. The lights didn't stop. But suddenly, everyone did. On stage, Miss Vicious froze mid-lip sync. The track continued to play, but she just stared at the spreading chaos, her rhinestoned lips trembling. Crystal Vice dropped her fan, the sound of it clattering like a gunshot. "What the fuck is happening?" someone whispered. Another body fell. Another shriek. The scrollers poured in through the warehouse doors, dozens of them, their dead fingers twitching as if glued to invisible screens. Their jaws snapped open and shut, teeth grinding like machinery, eyes fixed on the living with that blank, hungry scroll. Panic erupted. Glittered bodies trampled each other trying to flee. The music finally cut as the DJ was dragged screaming from his booth, his head caving under gnashing teeth. The strobes flashed blood across the walls, a grotesque disco of carnage. Backstage, the queens barricaded the door with costume racks, eyes wild, mascara streaked down their faces. Gilda Grace gripped a broken makeup mirror like a blade, her hands trembling. "They're not human," she whispered, staring at the splintering wood as fists pounded from the other side. "They're already dead." Silence fell for a moment, heavy and suffocating. The only sound was the slow, steady thump of the bass, still echoing from abandoned speakers. It was the heartbeat of a monster, and the warehouse had awakened. The night had only just begun. The barricade rattled with every slam of rotting fists. The queens huddled in the dressing room, breaths shallow, glitter-streaked tears cutting through their makeup like rivers carving stone. The air was thick with hairspray and the copper tang of blood that had seeped under the door. No one spoke at first. Their brains were too scrambled, caught between denial and terror. This wasn't supposed to happen here, not in a warehouse built for escapism, where every sequin was armor against the ugliness of the world. And yet, the ugliness had kicked the door in and demanded center stage. Miss Vicious paced, heels clacking like gunshots against the concrete. Her wig had tilted sideways, exposing the wig cap beneath, making her look less like a queen and more like a woman in battle. "I'm not dying in drag," she muttered, clutching a rhinestone stiletto like a dagger. "Not like this." Crystal Vice sat trembling, corset so tight she could barely draw breath. Her false nails clicked nervously against her thigh, tapping out a rhythm faster than the bass outside. They were eating people. Eating them. I saw. Her words dissolved into a dry heave. In the corner, Gilda Grace closed her eyes. Her lashes clung together with sweat, and when she finally spoke, her voice was hoarse, like gravel. "We've fought men who wanted us dead for just breathing. Cops with batons. Lovers with fists. Families with silence. But those things out there," she shuddered. "That's death itself, dressed up and looking for a meal." The pounding outside grew frantic. Nails screeched against the metal doorframe. Someone screamed from the other side, a high-pitched, strangled sound that cut off in a gurgle. Then came the wet tearing noises, the sloppy feast of teeth ripping through flesh. The queens winced, bodies pressed tighter together, as if shrinking could make them invisible. But the warehouse had become a cage, and cages never forgot what they held. Suddenly, a crash. The barricade shifted, racks of sequined gowns tumbling to the floor. A hand, gray, veined, twitching, snaked through the gap, clawing at the air. Its fingers twitched in that scrolling motion, as if searching for something invisible, but when they brushed Miss Vicious' leg, the grip was like iron. She shrieked, bringing her stiletto heel down with all the force she had. The heel punched through the creature's hand like a spear, pinning it to the floor. Black ichor oozed, smelling of rot and gasoline. The hand writhed but did not let go. "Get it off me!" Miss Vicious screamed, voice cracking into raw panic. Crystal Vice lunged forward, grabbing the broken makeup mirror from Gilda's trembling grip. With a cry, she slashed down, severing the wrist. The hand twitched once, then went still, the stumps leaking filth across the concrete. The pounding outside stopped. For a moment, there was silence. It was worse than the noise. "They're waiting," Gilda whispered. Her voice was heavy with a dreadful certainty. "Like wolves. They know we're here. And they know we'll have to come out eventually." The words sucked the last bit of air from the room. Somewhere out on the dance floor, the speakers still thumped faintly with the last loop of the DJ's track, warbling and skipping, like a heartbeat struggling to stay alive. The queens exchanged looks. They weren't friends, some of them weren't even civil, but the glue of fear bound them together tighter than any drag family could. "We need weapons," Crystal finally said, voice low, almost alien in its calm. "Costume racks, stilettos, broken mirrors, wigs soaked in hairspray, whatever we can turn into something sharp or flammable." Miss Vicious laughed bitterly. "Oh, honey. We're gonna fight a goddamn zombie apocalypse with drag props. Better than waiting to be eaten," Gilda snapped. They scavenged in a frenzy. Corset boning sharpened into spikes. A pair of heels duct-taped together into a makeshift mace. Sequin belts knotted into whips. Someone found a fire extinguisher, clutching it like salvation. It was ridiculous, tragic, and camp all at once. They were drag gladiators dressing for war. But even as they armed themselves, the warehouse seemed to shift around them. The shadows lengthened. The pounding bass grew slower, heavier, as if the building itself had caught the infection. Somewhere in the distance came a sound, low, guttural, like 1,000 throats moaning in unison. The scrollers were gathering. The queens froze, every glittered eyelid lifting toward the ceiling, listening. The moans grew louder, closer, vibrating the walls. The warehouse was no longer a party, it was a feeding ground. Crystal Weiss whispered, "If they get in, it's over." Gilda corrected her, eyes like stone. "No, darling. If we stay in, it's over." The door shuttered again. This time, it wouldn't hold. And somewhere deep inside each of them, behind the wigs and lashes and feuds, something else stirred, an ancient, desperate will to survive. The warehouse hadn't just awakened. The queens had too. The barricade gave way with a final, bone-splintering crack. The metal door bent inward, hinges shrieking, and then it collapsed under the weight of the bodies pressing against it. They spilled inside like a tidal wave of rot. Their skin was gray and split, their jaws working endlessly, teeth clacking as if scrolling through flesh instead of screens. Fingers twitched in empty gestures, scrolling through invisible feeds, but their eyes, dead, clouded, and hungry, locked onto the queens. The first one lunged for Miss Vicious. She swung her stiletto like a hammer, heel crunching through the creature's temple. Black fluid sprayed across the mirrors, dripping down in streaks that looked like mascara bleeding from God's eyes. The room erupted. Crystal Weiss screamed as a scroller grabbed her corset laces, yanking so hard her breath was cut off. She thrashed, nails slashing, and drove the sharpened corset boning straight into its throat. The thing gurgled but didn't fall. Instead, it dragged itself closer, mouth opening wide enough to unhinge, teeth snapping inches from her cheek. Gilda Grace, clutching the fire extinguisher like a relic, swung with all the strength her old bones could muster. The metal connected with a skull, exploding it into shards that painted the vanity lights with gore. She didn't stop swinging, rage and terror fueling her arms until the extinguisher dripped black ichor. Still, they kept coming. The dressing room, once their sanctuary of wigs and contour palettes, was now a slaughterhouse. Sequins stuck to blood, boas dragged through filth, makeup brushes snapped underfoot. Every scream was muffled by the moans of the scrollers, that endless sound of hunger. Miss Vicious was pulled down, claws raking across her thigh. She shrieked, thrashing, stabbing her heel into the creature's eye until it stopped moving. But the damage was done. Blood seeped down her leg, glitter mixing with it, sparkling like a cruel joke. Crystal saw it. Her face paled. "You're bitten. Shut the fuck up." Miss Vicious roared, but her eyes betrayed her terror. There was no time to argue. The queens were driven back, step by step, until their backs hit the stage curtain. Beyond it, the party floor stretched into chaos, dozens more scrollers wandering through the strobes, chewing on corpses, smearing the floor with entrails. The bass still throbbed, distorted now, like a dying heart refusing to quit. "We can't stay here," Gilda shouted, chest heaving. "We move, now." They burst through the curtain and stumbled onto the stage. The spotlight snapped on, blinding them, as if the warehouse itself wanted them to perform one final act. The audience was gone, replaced with a sea of the undead. The scrollers turned in unison, their heads snapping toward the queens with jerks too sharp to be human. Hands twitched. Feet shuffled. Moans rose into a symphony of hunger. And then they charged. Crystal Weiss hurled the broken mirror into the crowd, shards slicing into gray flesh. Miss Vicious swung her heel again, each strike punctuated with a guttural scream. Gilda doused one in fire extinguisher foam, the blast hissing like holy smoke, before bashing its skull in with the canister. The queens fought like animals, desperation turning glitter into weaponry. Every strike was survival, every breath stolen from death's mouth. They carved a bloody path through the dance floor, slipping on entrails, gagging on the stench, eyes wide with unrelenting terror. But survival has a price. One of the club kids, barely alive, reached out from beneath a pile of corpses. His face was half-eaten, teeth chattering through a ruined jaw. "Help, me," he gurgled, eyes pleading. Crystal froze. Her hand twitched toward him, instinct stronger than logic. But then his body spasmed, twitching fingers scrolling through the air. His clouded eyes rolled back. And he lunged. She screamed, yanking her hand back just as his teeth snapped where her wrist had been. Gilda grabbed her, dragging her away, eyes hard. "Don't waste yourself on the dead, girl. Save it for the living." The words cut deeper than claws. The queen stumbled toward the far side of the warehouse, lungs burning, arms slick with gore. Behind them, the scrollers wailed, a wave of hunger closing in. The warehouse lights flickered, casting the horror in strobe, a dance of blood and death. Miss Vicious limped, blood soaking her fishnets. She tried to hide it, but Crystal kept glancing at her, terror brewing in her chest. They both knew what it meant, but no one dared say it aloud. As they reached the back exit, they slammed against the door, locked. Gilda beat her fists against it, snarling. "We're not dying in here." The moans grew louder. Closer. Crystal looked around desperately, eyes landing on the DJ booth above, its ladder dangling. "Up there. We climb." With no other choice, they scrambled up, nails breaking, heels slipping, dragging themselves into the booth. From this perch, they could see the entire warehouse, a sea of scrollers tearing apart the remnants of the crowd, blood pooling like a river, limbs stacked like props for a grotesque performance. Miss Vicious collapsed in the corner, clutching her wound, sweat pouring down her painted face. She laughed bitterly, a sound like glass cracking. "Guess I always wanted to die on stage." Crystal's eyes filled with tears, but Gilda's face hardened. She looked down at the horde below, then back at the two queens beside her. "This is no stage," she whispered. "This is war." And the curtain had only just risen. The DJ booth stank of blood and smoke. From their perch, the queens could see everything, the warehouse floor crawling with scrollers, twitching hands and snapping jaws, the strobe lights painting the carnage in frantic bursts. Bodies lay in heaps like discarded costumes. Every time the bass dropped, the horde seemed to move in rhythm, a grotesque parody of a dance floor. Miss Vicious slumped against the wall, sweat slicking her painted face, her fishnets soaked with blood from the bite. The wound was ugly, teeth marks gouged deep, flesh torn and bruised. Glitter clung to it, shimmering grotesquely under the lights. Crystal Vice kept stealing glances at her, panic bubbling in her chest. "We can't just pretend it didn't happen. You're infected." Miss Vicious bared her teeth, feral. "Say it again and I'll make sure you get bitten too." Gilda Grace raised a hand. "Enough. Screaming at each other isn't going to keep us alive." Her voice was steady, but her eyes lingered on Miss Vicious with something colder than pity, calculation. Below them, the scrollers moaned in unison, hands twitching, necks jerking with glitchy movements. Some tore chunks of flesh from the fallen, chewing with vacant determination. Others simply scrolled the air, mouths moving soundlessly as if whispering to screens that weren't there. The sight hollowed something inside Crystal. These had been their friends, their audience, their family. Now they were meat. "We can't stay up here," Gilda muttered, scanning the booth. "No food. No water. And they'll find a way up eventually." Miss Vicious laughed bitterly, the sound breaking. "Then let's just give them a show. Go out covered in rhinestones instead of tears." Crystal snapped, her fear boiling over. "This isn't a show. You're dying, Vicious." You're going to turn into one of them and then you'll tear us apart, too. The words hung heavy in the booth. Miss Vicious' eyes narrowed, glitter smudged into dark bruises. You always hated me, didn't you, Crystal? You want me dead because I outshined you. This isn't about rivalry. Crystal's voice cracked. It's survival. Silence settled. Gilda finally broke it, her tone like steel. We'll need to make a decision. Soon. The three of them sat in that silence, the only sound the guttural chorus of moans below. The warehouse was alive with death. Miss Vicious pulled off her wig, tossing it aside. Her real hair, sweat-matted and dark, clung to her forehead. Without her drag armor, she looked human. Fragile. A woman staring down her own execution. You think I don't know? She whispered, voice trembling for the first time. I felt it the second those teeth went in. It's in me now. Crawling through my veins like fire. Every second I feel less, me. Her eyes filled with tears, glitter cutting paths down her cheeks. But I'm not ready to let go. Not like this. Not surrounded by those things. Crystal's heart twisted. For all the feuds and venom, Miss Vicious was still family. And family was complicated. A sudden thud on the booth's ladder snapped them back to terror. A scroller had noticed them, its twitching hands clawing upward. Its jaw snapped uselessly, but its grip was strong. More followed, gray bodies piling on the ladder, climbing like ants. They're coming. Crystal shrieked. Gilda grabbed the extinguisher again, smashing it down, knocking the first one loose. It fell, but two more took its place. The ladder shook violently, metal screeching against the wall. We can't hold this. Gilda grunted, smashing skulls as they climbed. We need to move. Crystal scanned the booth, eyes landing on a shattered window in the corner. Beyond it, the night glowed with the sickly light of burning trash cans and far-off chaos. Sirens wailed in the distance, swallowed by the city's screams. There, she pointed. Miss Vicious tried to stand, but her leg buckled. She collapsed, groaning, clutching her wound. Her eyes flickered with something dangerous now. Something not entirely her own. Crystal froze. Her painted lips trembled. She's turning. Miss Vicious looked up at them, eyes glassy, mouth twitching in that scrolling motion. Her hand reached out, not for help, but with a clawing hunger. The air in the booth split with panic. Crystal backed away, chest heaving. We can't take her with us. She'll kill us. Gilda stood still, extinguisher dripping black. Her gaze softened for a heartbeat, then hardened into something merciless. Then we don't take her, she said. Miss Vicious' mouth opened, letting out a moan too low to be human. Her eyes rolled white. Her fingers twitched faster, scrolling invisible feeds, hungering for flesh. The scrollers swarmed the ladder, the booth trembling with their weight. The queens had seconds to choose, mercy, murder, or hesitation. And hesitation would kill them all. The DJ booth felt smaller by the second. The ladder rattled as the scrollers climbed, their gray hands clawing closer, their jaws clacking in unison like teeth chattering at a funeral. The air was thick with sweat and panic. Every thud of their fists was a drumbeat counting down the queen's final moments. But the greater danger wasn't outside. It was already in the room. Miss Vicious lay slumped against the wall, her fishnets soaked dark, the bite festering with black veins that crawled up her thigh. Her lashes drooped, her breath came ragged. Every exhale carried a wet rattle. Her painted lips twitched, curling into something between a smile and a snarl. Crystal Vice pressed herself against the far wall, shaking so hard her nails dug blood crescents into her palms. She's changing. Right in front of us. Miss Vicious lifted her head. Her eyes were cloudy now, irises drowned in a milky haze. Yet there was still recognition, faint, flickering, like a candle fighting against the dark. I can still hear you, she croaked. Don't let me, her voice cracked. Don't let me become one of those things. Gilda Grace tightened her grip on the fire extinguisher, her jaw clenched. She had seen too many friends fade, too many slow deaths that demanded mercy when the world had none left to give. Her heart cracked, but her face stayed stone. We can't take her with us, Crystal said, her voice shaking but sharp. She'll kill us the second that thing takes over. Miss Vicious hissed, spittle flying. Shut up, you jealous bitch. You've been waiting for this, haven't you? Her laughter turned guttural, low, almost animal. Then she started to twitch, fingers scrolling through the air, jerking as if she was flicking through invisible flesh. The scrollers on the ladder howled, sensing her transformation, pounding harder, hungrier. Crystal screamed, we have to do it now. The room froze in that moment. Time stretched, heartbeat by heartbeat, every second weighted with blood. Miss Vicious' body convulsed. Her jaw unhinged wider than it should, a wet crack echoing through the booth. Black bile dripped from her mouth. Her hand shot out, clawing at the floor, dragging herself toward them. Gilda stepped forward, extinguisher raised. Her face was a mask, no fear, no hesitation, only brutal necessity. She whispered, so low only Miss Vicious could hear. I'm sorry, baby. But you're already gone. The extinguisher came down. Once. Twice. Again. The sound was wet, final. Glitter burst into the air like ash. Crystal screamed, covering her face, nails scraping against her skin. Tears cut black streaks through her makeup. She wanted to look away, but the sound, God, the sound, forced itself into her bones. Flesh breaking. Bone cracking. The extinguishing of a queen who, seconds ago, was still pleading for life. When it was done, the booth fell silent except for the moans below. Miss Vicious' body lay still, eyes open but empty, face caved in. Beneath shattered makeup. Her wigless head looked almost human again. Almost. Gilda dropped the extinguisher, her hands trembling despite her stoic mask. She whispered to no one in particular, I kept my promise. Crystal backed into the corner, sobbing. Her chest heaved, and she choked on the taste of hairspray and blood. You killed her. She was already dead, Gilda snapped, her voice cracking. The latter groaned, snapping their attention back. The scrollers had nearly reached the booth, their clawing hands pulling the metal closer to collapse. Window. Now. Gilda grabbed Crystal's arm, yanking her toward the shattered glass. The night outside screamed with chaos, sirens, gunfire, distant explosions. The city was eating itself alive. Crystal hesitated, looking back at Miss Vicious' body. A smear of rhinestones glimmered on the floor like fallen stars. Something inside her shattered. She was one of us, Crystal whispered. She still is, Gilda said. Now move. They climbed through the jagged glass, cutting their skin as they dragged themselves out onto the warehouse roof. The city stretched before them, a living nightmare. Fires burned in every direction, casting Brooklyn in a hellish glow. Figures shambled in the streets below, their moans rising like a choir of the damned. Crystal stood trembling on the rooftop, mascara dripping, staring out at the chaos. We're never getting out of this. Gilda stood beside her, shoulders squared, the skyline reflected in her tired eyes. Darling, she murmured, voice heavy with a strange, grim pride, we've been surviving the end of the world our whole lives. This is just louder. Below them, the warehouse shuddered as the scrollers finally overran the DJ booth. Glass shattered, moans howled, blood sprayed. The queens had escaped, for now. But the night wasn't over. And Brooklyn wasn't done feeding. The rooftop was no refuge, it was a stage without an audience, a high platform where the city below screamed louder than the music ever had inside. Brooklyn stretched in every direction, burning. Whole blocks glowed orange, buildings vomiting smoke into the sky. Sirens wailed and sputtered, cut off by sudden silence. From above, the streets looked like veins filled with gray blood, scrollers stumbling in droves, their twitching hands glowing faintly in the firelight as they scrolled through empty air. Crystal Vice hugged herself, her nails biting into her bare shoulders, shaking so hard her sequins rattled. The image of Miss Vicious' smashed face haunted her, eyelashes still clumped, mouth frozen mid-plea. The sound of the extinguisher echoed in her skull with every heartbeat. "We didn't have to do it like that," she whispered. Her voice cracked into the wind. There had to be another way. Gilda Grace didn't look at her. She stood near the edge, scanning the rooftops, eyes sharp, shoulders squared like a general who'd fought too many wars. There wasn't. Crystal's lip curled, tears stinging. "You killed her. You didn't even hesitate. You think hesitation is a luxury in this world?" Gilda snapped, spinning to face her. The city's glow carved shadows deep into her lined face. She was gone the moment those teeth sank in. "If you don't learn to accept that, you'll be the next body I leave behind." The words sliced deeper than claws. Crystal staggered back, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Her breath came ragged, panic collapsing into rage. "You think you're the mother of us all, don't you? The drag matriarch who knows everything. But you're just a tired old queen who's too used to burying people." Gilda's eyes flashed with something dangerous. For a moment, Crystal thought she'd strike her. Instead, Gilda's voice dropped low, trembling with a fury too controlled to be human. "I'd rather bury you than watch you eat me alive." The rooftop went silent except for the distant chaos below. The two queens stared at each other, glittered warriors standing on the edge of collapse. Then came the sound. A scrape, a groan of metal, the shuffle of something not quite human. From the far side of the roof, a shadow emerged. One of the warehouse security guards, a man who had always lingered at the door, half bored, half resentful of the glittered chaos, was dragging himself toward them. His chest was torn open, ribs exposed like broken piano keys, but his twitching hands scrolled the air, his clouded eyes fixed on them. Crystal gasped, stumbling backward. "Oh God!" Before she could finish, another appeared. And another. They hadn't been alone on the rooftop after all. The warehouse stairwell had led more than just them upward. The scrollers crawled across the tar and gravel, jaws clacking, hands twitching, eyes locked on the queens. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, but they were fast enough. Gilda didn't hesitate. She swung the fire extinguisher, smashing the first one's skull into mush. But more kept coming, clawing toward them with that terrible hunger. Crystal froze. Her body locked, her hands trembling too violently to grip her makeshift weapon. She heard Miss Vicious' voice in her head, laughter warped into static, "You'll be the next body I leave behind." One of the scrollers lunged at her, snapping teeth inches from her face. She screamed, shoving it back with a desperate surge of strength. Its jaw unhinged further, splitting flesh down to its neck, blood dripping onto her sequins. The horror was too much, her mind cracked. She shoved again, sending it tumbling off the roof. It didn't scream, didn't react, just fell silently into the firelit street below, landing in a wet crunch. Crystal collapsed, sobbing into her hands. "I can't do this. I can't, I'm not like you." Gilda grabbed her by the shoulders, shaking her. "You don't get to quit, Crystal. Not here. Not tonight." But Crystal's eyes were wide, unfocused. She was slipping, sinking into madness. Every face she saw in the shadows became Miss Vicious. Every moan was her name, whispered through rotten throats. "Crystal. Crystal." Another scroller lunged, and this time Crystal didn't move. Gilda shoved her aside at the last second, smashing the extinguisher down until bone split. She was panting now, blood slicking her arms. Her age showed, but so did her fury. "Get up," Gilda growled. "You either fight, or you feed them. Those are the only choices." Crystal dragged herself to her feet, mascara streaking like war paint. Something inside her shifted, not strength, but desperation masquerading as it. The queens stood side by side as more shadows crawled across the rooftop. The firelight painted their silhouettes against the smoke, two glittered figures armed with nothing but scraps and rage. Gilda raised her weapon. Crystal lifted her broken mirror. The city screamed around them. The rooftop shook with claws. And together, they prepared for the next act in a show no one had wanted to star in. The rooftop was no longer theirs. The scrollers swarmed, dozens of them now, crawling from the shadows, climbing from fire escapes, dragging their broken bodies across gravel. The skyline burned red, painting the horde in a glow that made them look almost ceremonial, like monsters in drag themselves, faces smeared, jaws stretched, glitter clinging to bloodied skin. Crystal Vice clutched her cracked mirror shard, her breath sharp and shallow. Every reflection in its broken surface was wrong, her eyes hollow, her lips trembling, her own face fractured into something monstrous. She wondered if she had already crossed the line, if she belonged more with them than with the living. Beside her, Gilda Grace's arms shook from swinging the extinguisher again and again. Her hair, once lacquered and perfect, now hung damp and wild. She was breathing hard, every motion laced with the knowledge that her body could only endure so long. But her eyes burned with a stubbornness that refused to dim. "Stay with me, Crystal," Gilda barked, smashing another skull into paste. Crystal nodded, but her thoughts were fracturing like her mirror. She could still hear Miss Vicious laugh, a hollow echo threading through the moans of the dead. "You're not strong enough, darling. Never were." The scrollers pressed closer. Their fingers twitched in rhythm, as though scrolling some invisible feed together, an eerie mockery of the audience they once had been. And then, one of them opened its mouth. A sound poured out, not a growl, not a scream, but a warped, static chorus of voices. Thousands layered together, like 1,000 social media feeds overlapping, a storm of meaningless chatter. Crystal's ears bled from the noise. Her mind buckled. She dropped to her knees, clutching her head. "Stop it, stop it, stop it." The sound burrowed deeper. The scrollers weren't just after flesh. They were a hive of noise, a collective hungry for minds, dragging every survivor into their endless scrolling, their eternal loop of meaningless motion. To be bitten was one fate. To listen too long was worse. Gilda hauled Crystal up, slapping her hard enough to snap her back for a breath. "You want to die screaming, or you want to fight?" Crystal's eyes darted across the rooftop. There was no escape. No doors. No ladders. Only the edge. Her stomach dropped as realization hit, the drag show hadn't ended, it had only changed stages. The rooftop was their final act. The scrollers, their final audience. "We're not getting out," Crystal whispered. Gilda followed her gaze, then nodded slowly. "Then we make it a show they'll never forget." The words hit like an injection of fire. For a brief, fragile second, Crystal remembered why she had ever stepped on stage, the power of transformation, of owning fear by turning it into spectacle. She stood taller, lifting her shard of mirror like it was a crown. Blood ran down her arm, glitter stuck to her sweat, but her voice rose steady and strong. "All right. You dead-eyed bitches," she screamed into the night. "Brooklyn's last queens are here to slay." The scrollers shuddered, heads twitching toward her as one. Their jaws opened, static roaring louder, the sound of millions screaming and scrolling all at once. Gilda let out a ragged laugh, raising the extinguisher. Curtain call. They charged together. Two queens against the flood. Sequins and blood. High heels stomping skulls. Makeup streaking like war paint. They fought not to survive, because survival was gone, but to perform, to leave something more than silence. Crystal drove her mirror into an eye socket, shrieking with every thrust. Gilda's arms gave way, but she still swung, each blow landing with a mother's fury. The rooftop became a frenzy of screams, crunches, static, and glitter flying through smoke. But numbers crushed them. Crystal was dragged down, her reflection lost in a swarm of hands. She saw her face one last time in the mirror, broken, terrified, beautiful. Then teeth closed on her throat, and her scream dissolved into static. Gilda roared, swinging until her body betrayed her. She locked eyes with the swarm, shoulders squared, head high. She would not give them her fear. When they pulled her under, she didn't scream. She whispered instead, "The show must go on." And then there was silence. The rooftop became just another stage swallowed by fire and static. Brooklyn burned, and the scrollers spread, a tide of endless noise and endless hunger. In the wreckage, sequins glittered in the wind, remnants of queens who had fought until the last spotlight dimmed. And below, the city screamed, as if chanting for an encore.